All right, so everyone's here. So we're ready to start the advisory design panel meeting. Our usual chair is absent today. So could I have an advisory design panel member volunteer to chair the meeting? Great, thanks, Tony.
Okay. So I guess we can call to order. So this is the application for 113 Hearst Avenue. And I'd like to start the meeting by adopting our minutes from our previous meeting of June the 24th, which I'm sure everybody has read. So could somebody move that those minutes be adopted? Ivan? Seconder? Guess that may have to be you, Ian. Limited numbers today. Okay, so we can, I guess, start the presentation by the applicant and run us through.
Good afternoon. My name is Claire Fontaine. I'm with DHK Architects. Joining us today is Alfred Korpershuk from DHK and Kara McDonald from McDonald Gray. Regretfully, Scott Stevenson from J.E. Anderson and Associates, our civil consultant, can't join us today, nor can Rick Eastholm, our applicant, from Departure Bay Construction. So we'll start with today's presentation. The project is 113 Hearst Avenue. Okay, so the project is in the downtown core in the C3 zone and the DPA zone 1. Area 1, pardon me. We are on Hearst Avenue at the corner of Hearst and Craig Street, which is right here. Oh, I'm sorry, it's so bleached out. So the property is along Hearst Avenue and fronts also and backs onto Hearst Middleton Laneway. Within the C3 zone, the intent is to provide land for pedestrian-oriented shops and offices that meet the various product and servicing requirements for consumers. Our project also has to follow the guidelines of the downtown DPA number 1 zone. There's a long list of items that go with that, and we've responded to each within the DP report that you have with you. Focusing within that is to revitalize the core by enhancing architectural form and character through the promotion of architectural particulars and landscaping. We want to respond to location, relate to the pedestrian scale through changes in material, windows, front doors, and wall articulations, as well as emphasize frontage with respect to massing materials, details, landscaping, and articulating facades to avoid large expanses of any one material. We want to orient and reduce shadow impact within the indoor and outdoor spaces and consider the incorporation of natural daylight that's drawn into the space. We also want to consider exterior finishes and colors that are appropriate to the natural heritage and tie into the neighborhood that pre-exists, as well as think about contemporary design colors that are forthcoming within the city of Parksville. We want to relate pedestrian walkways and landscape buffers so that you get a visual screening, but also get a nice, a soft edge between the building, the hard edge of the building that engages with the street. We want to incorporate energy and water conservation measures, as well as consider greenhouse gas emission measures, and incorporate mechanical venting and screening within the project. You bet. Sorry about that. So, come on. Oh, I see. We've got 2 mice. That's okay. It's just that's confused me. So these are contextual streetscapes that we have around the property. So this is along Hearst Avenue, looking up toward the property. Number 2 is from the intersection of Hearst and Craig. So you can see the property hinting right here, and then a little bit farther away, looking down Hearst. We're also considering the laneway aspects that relate from Craig Street towards the Middleton Hearst laneway, and looking at that towards the property. Currently, this property is an infill site. There was a fire there, so we're working with a blank slate. There's a pre-existing lane beside within the neighboring property design, as well as that back lane, and we are working with and around this pre-existing hydro column. Okay, so the project data is as follows. We were required to work with a site coverage of within 100% coverage, and we're proposing 85. So what we're trying to do with our design is find space for landscaping and more soft surfaces for stormwater management, as well as provide acceptable downtown core designs. We are also working within an FAR allowable of 2.0, and we're providing 1.8. So we're providing a density of 8 residential units over a commercial building. Our off-street parking requires us to have 11 parking stalls in total. We're proposing 1 through cash and lieu provision, and we are requesting a variance for a loading bay be removed. We'll look into that a little bit further with the specifics of the variances. So these are some points of view around the building. Number 1 is looking from the southeast corner. You can see we are working with a 2-story residential building here. And remember that we're working within the downtown core zone. So the future zoning of this property and all the properties around it are allowable to have up to 3-story buildings. And so we're working within the context of 1 and 2-story at the moment. We want to provide edges that are considering beautifying the neighboring properties. We want to make sure that we don't have one surface material. So we thought long and hard about how to break up the facades in measures that provide form and character and delineate the elevations in color. I'm afraid it's a little bleached out, but the colors on images on your desk will show you a little more detail. The rear of the site is more animated with landscaping, and this is the predominant residential entry to the building. On the front, we have a mid-block view and the commercial entry, which we can follow in the next slide. So this is that mid-block view, which is it seems to be a defined feature of the downtown core, and we wanted to create a space that sort of a pause along the street edge. So the downtown core measure is to provide a fully developed block. So the main floor is supposed to engage with both property lines. So to do that, and we wanted to create this pause, there'll be a bench at this little reserved, and there'll be a bike stall and a sort of a spot to meet your friends as they're coming out of their space, or harbor from the rain as you're waiting for somebody. And then right here, we have the commercial entry. The entries are predominantly glazed. So I believe we need to be between 65% and 85% glazing on the front facade, and we're providing 66%. And then you also have a requirement for the spacing of the doors. So we're meeting that. It needs to be 6 meters between doors maximum, and we're providing minimum 5.5 meters. So we're trying to make that front engaging streetscape as articulated as possible. We're warming up the facade with warm materials in the soffit, so your color is really going to be jumping out at you in that regard. And then the concept is that the commercial floor is sort of landing on these stone fins that support the residential floors above. So as you can see, there's these little stone fins in stone veneer, and then we've got the idea is that you're landing on this sort of darker form with the lighter elements sort of popping up above. The concept for the residential is to have nice deep balconies for each of the residential units. Now we have 2 2-bedroom units per floor and 2 one-bedroom units per floor. All of them, these 3 have dens, and this one is a little bit smaller. And they all have their own balcony, which are predominantly covered with roof. So our water and energy conservation measures are to provide passive solar and deep roof overhangs and penetrations for solar-ready systems on the roof. We're providing parking stalls with a rough-in for electronic vehicle charging stations. That the intent is for them on the rear, on the downstairs, for electrical charging station to be part of the development or the building permit stage. And one system will facilitate the 2 stalls to either side. We also propose shielded light fixtures and drought resistant plants, which Kara can describe in further detail. As we move to the 3rd floor, you can see there's been a revision in the last week, I'm afraid. We just sent that through to you. The idea was to provide more glazing onto the 3rd floor levels. So we've raised the ceiling heights in those spaces and provided more natural light into the areas. We've also, as part of that measure, sorry, if we go back 1 slide, it's very weird having 2 mice. We grew these 2 bedrooms, this one and this one, to accommodate the internal coordination of consultants that we've been exploring. So those are the minor changes that have happened. Residential windows and sliding glass doors are operable and promote passive cooling and air circulation. We really want to think about the fact that when the power goes out in the summer, we've had a number of these, that you don't get too hot. You want to be able to have that passive ventilation. And then we're providing insulation for the same measures in the winter, opposite seasonal needs. We're providing double pane glazing and energy efficient appliances. The materials for the building are predominantly non-combustible in nature. Now we're dealing with 2 edge conditions on a property line. So we're proposing metal, wood look metal siding, a Lucabond panel siding, which is that white piece that supports both balconies on either side, the front and the rear. We're proposing corrugated metal siding and fiber cement panel siding on the side. Get into that. So you can see the front pieces, these forms are being generated out of that white Lucabond panel. So we really wanted to provide some nicer materials as you engage with the front street and the rear. So we've got that. We've got the stone fins, the darker hardy panel. The metal wood look cladding is inside. It's warm to warm up that central level, and it's also occurring on the soffits. So you've got that honeydew look. And then we've got a lap siding in gray with corrugated metal. So we're starting to play with the stepping articulated forms of the elevations. Oops. Come on. There you go. On the sides, we wanted to really make sure we broke up that mass. So you can see the commercial level is this dark plane. The rear of the property is shielding the parking stalls from the neighboring property. And we've got the articulated corrugated metal is coming up the line of the elevator shaft, and it's also mimicking the line of the egress stair on the inside. Oh, goodness. The lighting palette is, we were trying to play with nice color, nice materials for that. So Kara can go into the more detail about the post-top luminaire. That's number 1. Number 2 is a linear lighting that'll be probably predominantly in the entries and in the rear covered parking area. So to make that more lively, we'll have focused feature lighting to illuminate the stone detailing on the first level, and then shielded lighting on the exterior. So any security lighting as needed. And we'll probably also be providing pot lights. So we're really thinking about keeping the dark sky principles and any shielding that's possible from neighboring properties. Oh goodness, sorry. Okay, so we respectfully request the following variances to achieve this project. We're requesting a 1.8 height variance, a meter height variance to achieve and complete architectural roof lines. As you can see, this is the anticipated form of the elevator shaft. Now, we've done other projects with 3-story buildings, and this is approximately the overdraw height of the elevator. So we really want to make sure that we can achieve our building. We are providing screening for the mechanical equipment because we know that's a major feature. We're also articulating the roof line along the street edges. We want to do pop-up forms so that when you're looking at it, you get a more 3-dimensional understanding of the building, and that'll mask what's hiding, what the mechanical screening from behind, and give more of an interesting perspective to the elevations. We are also requesting that one of the standard size stalls be interpreted as a small car stall. So that takes our standard car stall size percentage from 60% to 70%. And this will facilitate providing a nice design with that can provide a mixed use to the property, and also provide adequate space for landscaping. That's okay. In terms of parking, we are working with a oblong shape or a very random shaped property. So we're trying to squeeze a whole bunch of rectangles into an angled site. We've done the best we can with this, and we are requesting respectfully that we minimize the rear yard setback from 3 meters to 2.7 meters. So that's a variance of 0.3 meters on the north property line on the laneway. And then on the west side, where we have the building is predominantly masking and shielding these parking stalls, we request that property line be reduced from 1.5 meters to 0.6 meters. So a variance of 0.9 meters on the east property line. And then on the west property line, which is fronting that laneway of the neighboring property, we're requesting that it be reduced from 1.5 meters to 0.3 meters, so a 1.2 meter variance. We, in anticipation of providing the most realistic project to design panel, we wanted to do some preliminary work with hydro. So we're anticipating that the PMT will be located here. And as such, we're showing you what the landscaping will be doing to coordinate with that. We request that the loading bay space be removed from this project. Typically, a loading bay is required for each 2,000 square meter gross floor area of commercial use. We're proposing a mercantile space of approximately 168 square meters. So it's quite small. We don't anticipate that a loading stall shall be required for this project and request that it be removed. Within the DPA 1 zone, there's an indication that variances for off-street parking and loading may be considered as part of the development permit. So we've requested that's a possibility. Variances for landscaping. So our final request is that on Hearst Avenue, we provide a green variance of the vegetation from 1.5 meter width to 1.7 meters. That's a variance of 0.8 meters. The C3 zone provides a setback of 0 meter setback. So the intent is to have the building as close to the property as possible. We're also working within the streetscape 2 zone, which is it doesn't include specifics about the minimum width of landscape. So our interpretation of this was to provide a building that engages with that street edge and is achieving all the particulars in terms of glazing and step back and engagement, while ensuring that the landscape sort of curves within. And so it's working with the program, and they're trying to work together with the articulation. Oh, there's my mouse again. Where'd it go? Oh, I did something. It's working. Oh my God. Yes. So sorry, we're doing this to you.
The next slide, I believe, is an intro to Kara. We'll be able to talk about.
Oh my God, I'm not sure.
I don't mind.
Oh, did I do something?
I don't know.
You know what? Let's try. Is that me? Oh.
Looks a little square, but that's okay. Hi, it's nice to be the same height. My name is Kara McDonald. I'm a landscape architect. There's obviously not a lot of landscape involved in this project, so I'll be brief. Claire covered the variance request for her street frontage. So on her street, where the building articulates, we did provide landscaping. We wanted to use definitely, it's small areas, so we used impact for foliage color, flowering, drought tolerance for sure, as always, to give some interest along the street. There's also a bench on the southeast corner and bike rack. The bike rack standard you can see on the left there is a sit down, basically matches the city's downtown standard, but we'll put it in a moonlight silver to complement the building colors. And then a park bench also will be located undercover in the corner there and just in front of the Mew. And in the rear yard, again, we focus more on using larger plant material to screen the parking lot and trees where we could fit them in, being cognizant that there are overhead wires as well in the lane. So that species is chosen to make sure it won't eventually interfere with the overhead wires. And again, those plants are chosen for seasonal interest and drought tolerance. Don't think there's a whole lot more to say. Oh, the post top luminaire that you saw a couple slides back, that is a smaller version, again, that matches the downtown standard. So since it'll be on the lane, I thought on a couple of projects, I've just been thinking that it will just sort of complement the downtown furniture. Again, it's a smaller version and it will put it in I think the color was also in a silver, if I recall. So it'd be a different color, but it would the form, it would still match downtown standard. So that's all. Thank you.
Stevenson's component, that's civil. So he wrote down some descriptions of the stormwater management plan because you had questions about it in your technical letter. So essentially the strategy is that we're collecting all the stormwater management into an oil water separator, and that's filtered out to filter out any sediments and oils that are from the parking lot. This tank will limit the flow that can head towards the city system by forcing the water back into a rock pit. Depending on the ground conditions, some water may infiltrate from the rock pit and otherwise the pit just acts as a storage facility. So essentially the stormwater management plan it will meet the pre-development flow rates. So there's no increased impact on the city infrastructure. Exact details will be worked out with the city engineering standards at BP stage. The development uses the existing roads and services by having the main pedestrian access across the street frontage and only vehicular access from the lane from beyond, which follows good practice and city requirements. Servicing is all is all engaged with the existing systems and should have sufficient capacity for the proposed demands. And that's the end of our presentation. Okay,
So that's everything.
Yes.
All right, so I guess we'll open to the panel for commentary. Would anybody like to start? Ian, would you mind starting?
Hello. Again, I'd like to just apologize for not getting here on time. So, and then to top it all off, I couldn't get into the building when I did get here. I had to run around several doors. Anyway, thanks for the presentation. The building looks very, I would say, fitting because it's a very small lot, and I think you've managed to provide all of the kind of requirements that the zoning is asking for. So I'm happy to see that. There were some instances in the zoning that talk about specific materials, things like wood and brick and all of that. So I guess you've worked that out with the planning department that you're not going to be actually using those particular materials, but you're using whatever you're using here right now. So I'm happy with that. There was one part, I'm a little bit concerned about the front entry to the residential. And I just wondered whether there could have been some more differentiation. I know you've got it recessed quite a long way back. But in terms of the ground plane, they change, some sort of material change or a color or something to separate that from the commercial entry, because the language of the entrances, all of the entrances look the same, except one's recessed a little bit more. There's an opportunity on the front wall that gets quite close to the sidewalk where we could use part of that wall for some sort of creeping landscaping up the side of that wall. That's a landscaping issue. You didn't talk much about site lighting, although I probably didn't hear it because the acoustics in this room are awful. I can't, everything's echoing and it's very difficult to hear what you're saying. But the scale, I think, is fine. I don't have any objections to what you've done, and you've managed to articulate, the overall building quite well, given the size and scale of the building. So I'll probably get back to one or two things. I did make a little list here as we were going through, but I'll let some of the other members chime in at this time. Thank you.
Hi there. Thanks for your presentation. Sorry, I can't hear too much. And as Ian says, the acoustics in here are terrible. I have one comment about, which is directed at the city and not at so much at you guys. But when we have these presentations, I think it would help to have a streetscape as part of the requirement for the presentation. Because these buildings don't just float in space on their own. They relate to other buildings, to the street, to the power lines, to the road, and they need to be seen in that context. And in particular, this one, the building next door, which is a group home, is now going to be dwarfed by this 3-story building, and I know that you have fulfilled the requirements of what this building is supposed to be. But I feel sorry for those guys who knows how long they're going to be living in the shadow of this 3-story building. And we can just say, well, maybe it's unfortunate, but that's progress. And I think that in that particular case, if you just jump around a bit here, that on that east elevation, I think instead of having the different materials to differentiate, there would maybe if we had a trellis that you could grow some creeper up there that for the time that it'll take to develop that lot, it won't be that overpowering for the people next door. And probably also take away a canvas from the taggers that are bound to go and decorate that building. So, you know, I find that the building itself is a very competent design. It's an innocuous building, but it could be anywhere. And that is what I worry about in relation to our official community plan, which has tried to carve out a particular character for the city of Parksville. And we just keep on ignoring those very basic requirements that the OCP has laid out. And so while I can't fault the overall building design, and I'm sure, you know, if you had 10 architects given the same parameters, they'd all come up with something that is pretty close to what you have there, because that's what the site determines is going to be there. But to me, this just does not say Parksville, and I think there are opportunities. And Ian mentioned the entrance, where one of the suggestions of the OCP is to highlight the entrances with maybe a timber trellis or something that would signify that that was a different use from the other storefronts. And also, as Ian mentioned, the colors in the OCP, we talk about a whole range of colors that are nothing like what we have on this building. And personally, I like the colors, but they do not reflect what is in the OCP. And it's in the OCP to try and create a certain character for the city. You know, it's not that prescriptive that you can't do anything with it. And, you know, the building, it's a cross between Bauhaus and North American modern, and it's, you can't fault that. But I think we really need to know if we're going to keep to the guidelines or not, because otherwise, what are we doing here? You know, we're not, what are we criticizing? Okay, then in a more specific thing, I'm glad to see that there is some attempt at water retention and we use that, but in water conservation, I noticed in the checklist, which is everyone puts this in this useless checklist that we have that says low flow toilets. Well, the reality is today, every toilet is a low flow toilet. They don't make high flow toilets anymore. So that's, you know, need to do something more in terms of energy conservation and water conservation. And as far as passive heating, lighting and cooling, having a window that occasionally gets some sun is really not passive solar. Like it needs to be something that is more specifically targeting that in your design. Also, I don't know if you've ever calculated how much photovoltaic array you could put on that roof, but I can tell you now, whatever you can fit on that roof will not satisfy the needs of one of those apartments, because there's just not enough space up there. So putting future solar-ready connections or whatever the hell that means is just a waste of time and money. It's not going to happen, and it's tokenism, and it's greenwashing, and to use the latest buzzword, it's virtue signaling. It's really not doing anything. It's not a so. And then shed roofs, says seasonal shade needs. They don't offer much shade. They're too high up there to offer any shading. They might help with passive solar, but they're not going to help with any kind of shading. So one other thing, handicap access to the parking area. There is no access for handicap to the parking area. So if someone who is handicapped has an apartment in this building, they would, I don't know how they would get to their garbage container. And I think that that's something that can be rearranged, and maybe well, I'm not going to redesign it for you, but it's just something that needs to be, you can't ignore people with special needs just because it's inconvenient and because it may not, you don't need a handicap stall apparently, but you can't ignore them for that. And there's one other thing that this is a construction issue that I keep seeing. Back in the day when the Barrett Commission came out, the first casualty of that was cantilevered decks. And more, I keep seeing projects with cantilevered decks, and I'm wondering if the thinking has changed on that, or people just not aware of the problems that can occur through the envelope at the intersection of the cantilevered deck and the building face. And it was a huge problem in the leaky condo crisis where the structure rotted back inside from cantilevered decks. And I don't know if the building department is even aware of stuff like that, but I'm just mentioning that I keep seeing this thing slowly coming back, and it's something that concerns me. Anyway, otherwise, I think that it's a nice little building, and like I say, 10 architects would have 10 different takes on that basic story, but
perhaps I'll go next. We were asked fairly specifically to address the variances that you were asking for. So I thought maybe I'd just speak to those briefly. One of them was the building height, and looking at what you're doing with a commercial space and then having 9-foot ceilings on your second floor, and then sort of penthouse sort of sloped roof ceilings in the upper floor. I don't see how you could possibly do the building in 11 meters. I just question a little bit if that's not an older standard when you might have had a number of typical floors with 8-foot ceilings and not today's kind of standard for commercial spaces. So frankly, I would have no objection to the height of the building. It's not a huge increase. The parking variance, which is really one more small car and one less large or standard. Normally that's been going along quite well. It seems like vehicles have gone into being SUVs and trucks again. And Frankly, I would support the smaller car stalls, but I don't know that that's the way the trends are going. I don't really have an answer for you because I see this building as being an attempt to fit something commercially viable on a very small lot. And I can see where you've looked at every possible avenue to get additional floor space. I think we should be putting less emphasis on parking these days anyway. So I would have to summarize by saying that I personally do not have an objection to that either. Normally, I think there would be concern about the third item they asked us to look at, which is the setbacks. And again, I don't think the one at the lane is of particular concern. Normally, they would be concerned about cars parked so close to the neighboring property lines, but you're shielding the cars. And I think that's more of a visual requirement. So once again, I would say that I would support that amendment because, well, A, you've got to get these stalls on the site, and B, you have concealed them from the neighbors. In general, with the materials, I like the materials. I can appreciate that they're high quality. You know, you have kind of a stone veneer and a Lucabond and cedar soffits and some siding and that kind of thing. I appreciate what Ivan was saying about color. I guess I don't see gray or white specifically in the list of colors. That, you know, we have brick, rust, moss, cream, sage, taupe, forest green, sand, ochre, bisque, clay, brown, tan, cedar, and beige. So somehow we managed to miss your colors in that extensive list. Again, I like the color palette, and I really like the material palette, and I like the articulation in the building, and the fact that your property line walls, which are normally horrific on buildings like this, you know, to see two masonry walls on a property line on both sides because they're firewalls is, you know, the old solution. And when I look at these walls, I have to give you credit for having different materials and trying to break up the space there. One little thought, I agree with the entrance assessment that it could be more definite. I just wondered if any thought had been given to how far back that entrance is and whether it's going to collect homeless people or not. You know, it's a pretty nice shelter underneath there. It works both ways. The people who live here, if they're catching a cab or something at the front, it's great to have cover. But at the same time, that could attract people for the night to sleep underneath there. So I don't know if there's any percentage in bringing that wall forward. It's only a suggestion, but it's just something we see increasingly in the downtown area. So it might be a concern. Overall, for such a small site and you know, trying to, you fit within the floor space ratio requirements and come up with a, you know, a nice building. So I would have to compliment the look of this building, and frankly, its contemporary look, I think, will do a lot for that area of downtown, which is pretty tired right now. So that would be my comments. And I wondered too if you wanted to address any of the things that you heard, particularly Ivan raised some issues. Would you like a chance maybe to speak back to those? I will get to you, Marilyn, sorry. Yeah, but I'd still like to hear what you have to say.
Do you want me to go now?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Start with
Tony,
Ian.
sorry to interrupt. Did we want to go around one more time? I think Ian might have had a few more things to say.
We can go back to you if you want to, or we can do it
Sure,
now.
whatever, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to hear maybe like what we brought up so far addressed. And if you've got more, I think if you're
Yeah.
okay, we could do it again.
Okay.
All right, so Ian, you said, so you focused on front entry differentiation. So we're talking about the ground plane material finishes. I think that's a totally acceptable thing to do. Let's go. So changing the material palette, maybe at the mid-block view, to start to engage with the front entry and make that a little more special. I think that's what you're trying to say. So I think that could be done. And we can work with Kara to work at grade finishes and material, thinking about colors. Maybe we think about some accentuation along that. So maybe there's like a feature of wood or something in there that's bringing it to life and making it a little more special, if you guys would like. So the wall, the landscape creeper, I'll let Kara respond to that in a moment. Site lighting. So let's go back to this slide. Okay. Okay, so site lighting in the rear of the site. I'm sorry, I can't really do both, but the rear of the site, we're proposing a lamp standard, and we're thinking about the linear lights underneath the covered parking area. Now there may be, we have engaged an electrical consultant that'll start to think about the explicit lighting needs for the site and make sure that it's fully illuminated as per requirements and safety. We're proposing that number 5, the downcast light would probably be situated along the side walls, so the east and west elevations, and that'll provide down lighting without spilling too far onto the neighboring properties, but providing that safety need. And again, the electrical consultant will be able to provide feedback as to how much that'll be without bothering the neighbors. We would focus on having the 3 and 4, the down lighting. That'll probably be happening at the entries. Thinking about illuminating any of the textured finish of the stone veneer and any signage that may happen. I can't explicitly design the lighting because it's not my field of expertise, but we're just trying to give you a palette of what the lighting types would probably be. We're also anticipating or hoping that we would be using linear lighting either at the main entry or a series of pot light. Well, probably linear lighting at the main entry, and there'll probably be pot lights within the overcast balconies. So, and again, on the 3rd floor where you said that the roofs are a little bit higher, we may have the wall mounted light that's downcast. So we want to provide that exterior lighting, but in a manner that's achievable and respects both the neighbors and the users of the building. In terms of the neighboring building, the 2-story resident to the east, we can certainly look into the trellis concept or something along that facade. Now we really have to think about how to create anything on that wall, but use non-combustible finishes because it's a firewall essentially. So we want to maintain safety. So we'll have to look into that and explore the possibilities that may be present for that. Well, we have to think about how it's connected to the building and what it's holding on to. Now, you don't want a creeper to break the finishes of the building and erode it. So I'm sure Kara can speak to the qualities of different plant bases. I can't do that, but I know that you don't want it to get behind finishes. So, Kara, do you want to speak to that?
Just briefly, I can definitely talk to the client about providing some screening on that wall. My first thought is that the best solution, given that it is a firewall, would be to use a green wall. Sorry, I got so used to it there. It would be rather than using a trellis like a timber trellis or anything like that, possibly using, and again, after looking into the fire issues, possibly using a green wall system that is basically a metal structure that would be attached to the wall, and using a climber, not a plant that sticks on the wall, that actually will twine up with a trellis, may be a solution for that wall. So we can explore that I'll have to talk to the client about it. Obviously, there's a cost associated with it. So we can definitely explore that. The trellis on the entry, I'm already they're gonna have to hand water the plants that are in that planter out front already because they're undercover. So they're gonna have to hand watered in the winter. So I'm not sure that adding more plant material is necessarily gonna work undercover, I guess would be my comment to that, but anything's possible. If we're looking into green wall on one side, we can probably do a smaller version on the interior of that mew and just pick a really dry, shade tolerant species if I can find one that'll work.
It's a lot of comments. So in terms of the colors, we were trying to think of a palette that was both relaxed but accentuates the wood look. So the wood look metal siding is a metal profile that's we're proposing for both the elevations and for the soffit material. And the reason for that is it's the maintenance requirements for it. We want to maintain the color, and it's actually a totally recyclable material. So that's also why we're presenting that palette. We can consider changing the color palette. I'd have to speak to the client for that, of course, if we were to invite some more creams or something, but we would want that to be direction from you guys. Water conservation measures. So you mentioned low flow toilets and expanding upon that. Okay, so we're doing our best in terms of stormwater management and how to conceive that. In terms of water conservation within each of the residential units, effectively, it comes down to how the users are using the space. So if they're using low flow toilets, low flow dishwashers, it's all the equipment as units, the best type and quality measures that they can put in. So that's what we're proposing. So that'll be the washing machines and the dishwasher and all of that. And shower heads. So it's not just the low flow toilet, but it's all of those smaller items that really contribute to the whole. And that's for everybody in Parksville and this neighborhood. In terms of heating, yes, you're right. The high roofs on the third floor are probably not going to provide the solar shading. We could consider some additional lower profile sun louvers. If that's a feedback comment, we can consider that. We were thinking mostly the shading is that lower roof deck. So it's effectively, we're providing the required shading to a better effect within the second floor, and we're providing better sun needs on the top floor. So what we were trying to think in terms of solar array and entrance into the building is working with a site that's off to an angle. So how is it bringing light in, and how are the spaces that are within and the rooms that are associated with those windows best engaged with that natural light. Shade too high. Accessibility. So you are correct. The building is by meeting the code requirements of an accessible entrance off of Hearst Avenue. We are not meeting the accessible needs to the rear of the site. Now, the parking requirement is or does not request a handicap stall for this particular building. And you're right, we would need to consider how you get your garbage to that rear space. So what we were trying to think about, and all of these things at the same time, is how do you get a garbage truck into the building without compromising the parking and engage with the front street edge. What could happen? We'd have to really think about how that could be shifted around on the site without causing the garbage truck to be coming off of Hearst Avenue effectively. It's a very strategic thing, but we can consider that if need be. Access. So accessibility specifically to the parking stalls in the rear of the site. There's not essentially a lot of space back there to have a what's it called? A barrier-free access to that rear section of the site, unless we were to drastically change the grading of the parking levels to meet that main lobby. But we are providing an accessible entrance from the street, from Hearst Avenue to both the main entrances. And we're providing that access through the building. It's just kind of a different concept of the site. Construction. Detailing about connections to cantilevered balconies. We can definitely think about that during the VP stage and how we address those details. Variances standards. Thank you for your variance contributions. And the last comment so far was about the entrance positioning of that entry door. So right now, that entry door is deep set into the building. It's facilitating access to the hydro room, that electrical room, because it needs to have its own door. And we wanted to make sure that that green space was maintained. So there's quite a few factors going into there. It might be that there is a more illuminated space, than it's a lighter zone, so that it doesn't facilitate homeless people wanting to live in that space over an evening. But I don't know how to change that without moving the door too much. And it comes down to a question of, do we want to remove the bench, bike part, the space, the green space, and that nice deep entrance? We have to figure out what is most important for that entrance. So we look forward to feedback, and if that's a comment, we can pursue it.
Yeah, I think I'd support the lighting idea, improve the lighting. Back to you, Ian.
Yeah. I didn't have time to double check some of the building bylaws in Parksville, but is it permissible to have residential right on the property line on a street? I'm referring to the balconies. And it seems like the balconies actually touch the property lines for the residential on the street side. So I'm just wondering what happens when somebody has a glass of wine on the balcony and it falls over. Is that a requirement that the residential portions of a building should be set back from the property lines on the higher levels? Or was that checked? I don't know.
So the zoning for downtown C3 zone, it's a 0-meter lot setback on the sides and the front, and the rear of the building is 4 meters. As far as building code requirements, that's not my area of expertise, so I can't comment to that.
Yeah, it's not a building code requirement, but I just wondered whether that was permitted or not, because I know that in Nanaimo we can't get away with that. The other thing I wasn't sure about is there a handicap parking space in the?
No, there's not one required based on the parking requirements.
Is that a
The install
variance
count.
or is that?
No, that's permissible within the standards of the zoning.
So it's not required?
No.
Okay. Yeah, okay, but those are some concerns. The other one, I still have to go back to the entryway. I just find that the choice of a dark gray material for that entire length of that space, it feels like a long tunnel, that's all. And it just concerns, just wondering whether simple things like holes in the side of that wall, I know it's a firewall on the floors above, but in that front entry, I don't think it has to be. So openings there could help lighting to come sideways into the building, unless I got it wrong about the firewall. But I just think that having a very long, dark gray entrance is not incredibly inviting. And it's just a aesthetic thing. It's just a human thing, that's all. So the other concern, of course, is that I know what you're trying to do aesthetically with the building, with the white or near white bands but when you look up at the building, if you're on street level and you look up at the building, it's quite severe, at that property line area, because you won't be able to see that there is very good articulation beyond that, with the indentation that you've got with the actual front wall of the units. So that, I guess you would call it not a facade, but that front line of the balconies will be quite severe from the street level. So I don't know if the answer is to take a look to see how any of those edges can be articulated, or maybe there's some greenery that can hang over the edge to make it feel like there's someone living up there, but those are design issues. That's, I think the building is still quite very well done, and, for the scale and size of how it fits on the site, I'm quite happy with it. Thank you.
Okay. And Marilyn, would you like to contribute anything? Oh, sorry, Ivan, did you want a second opportunity? Go ahead, Marilyn.
Well, thanks, and I apologize for my phone. There's something wrong with the iPhone. It's definitely not me. I turned it off, did it again, so I have no idea what's going on. It's haunted. So I just want to thank the panel for your comments and thank you for your presentation. And it takes a lot of pressure off of me to when I've got panel saying the things that I want to say. So I appreciate that. One of the things that does stand out for me, and I'm going to mention it because it does continually come up, and I know that Glenn and I have talked about it a lot, and that is the way the mechanical is screened or appears to be screened. So that's just in our OCP, and I think that Ivan brought up the OCP, which is a huge issue, for me at least, is that that's the only guide we have. That's what the people want. And so I just feel a lot of concern. I'm not sure how, and I was going to ask a question, is it seems to be quite gray and light on the front of the elevation, and on the rear it's dark. So I'm not sure, and I have to question, they're in our guideline, DPE guidelines, there are quite a few options for doing that screening. And I think it's quite an industrial looking building. It's nice. Whether it follows the type of building that was intended in the OCP is another question. But once again, we've got more or less flat roofs, and that I'm just wondering if there could be more inventive ways to hide that mechanical. There is a professional building on Weld. It's a very nice building, sort of similar. However, I have a friend who lives behind that laneway and looks directly at mechanical screening similar to that. And so it went by council, and no one really thought anything of it until I sent them a photo later, and they said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize how impactful that is." So I just think it's fair to mention, because I would certainly bring it up later, and it's nicer now that you are aware of that being a potential issue. And then I think a few people have mentioned the accessibility issue, which for an aging, well, we have a lot of older folks here. I'm one of them. And right now with a bad ankle, I can tell you accessibility is really important. So I think that that's something that's fair enough. And we've lost the accessibility panel member, unfortunately. So, and the other one, of course, it's always a sticky wicket for everybody in the community, is rainwater catchment. Water is a big, big issue here. We have a lot. I realize the landscape architect, we have drought tolerant plants and whatnot, but it would also still be nice to find that. And if you're going to do a green screen, I don't know, maybe there is some way to incorporate that aspect into it. And it would be really nice to see passive house building here, something unique, different. And the other thing I was going to mention is lighting, because it's been brought up here. We do have issues with homeless and crime and theft, etc. And it's wonderful to see these neighborhoods, being developed. It's really exciting. It really is. But I know that sometimes there are complaints when the lighting does spill out into the residential. So you touched on that aspect. So I just want to reiterate that to you, that's kind of important. So that balance between safety and that overflow. So, but otherwise, thank you. And thanks for letting me speak, Tony. I appreciate it very much.
coming back to the materials again, there's a line that said visually dominant materials should be indigenous natural ones such as wood, stone, and brick. And that shouldn't be that limiting, but the Bond or whatever it's called, that's certainly not a natural material. And to me, it's sort of in the same kind of zone as stucco, in that it's a flat finish that is kind of bland. And then the thing about the colors is that I don't know why we can't stick to the colors that are recommended in the OCP, because it doesn't mean that things will be all bland and uniform. And uniformity is not a bad thing in some ways. If you think about places like Santorini, where every building is white, yet every building is different. And, or Cinque Terre, where every building is a different color, but there's something that's what makes those places, is that there is a certain uniformity that binds them all together. And I think that's the people that were drafting this policy were trying to achieve, like trying to get some kind of a homogeneity in the style of architecture for Parksville. And what happens now is we get all these wonderful buildings, but they are not connected to one another in any way. And I think that is the essence of the problem that we have, and it's not enforced by the city, and it's not, certainly most of the architects just give it a pass too. So that's my little rant about it. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. As far as the entrance is concerned there, if we're going to start catering to every possible miscreant that could be living there, then we're really lost. I think that we can't, the project that you guys did behind Thrifties had a similar thing where put a fence up alongside a blank wall because the possibility of homeless people going to live there. And I think that's just so unfortunate that we have to even think in those terms, that I don't think we should do that.
Well, unfortunately, that's reality though.
Maybe bright lighting or something that would discourage people from doing that.
I just wanted to add to what Marilyn said too about the flat and sloped roofs. They did have the option, according to 5A, to have flat and or sloped roofs in the commercial area. So I guess you've kind of got both going on here. Anyway, if everybody has made their comments, I guess we could put together some recommendations based on what we've heard from the panel. I'd just like to point out that my pen died, so we're going to find out how good my memory is. Help me out if it isn't. That's okay. Well, it's too late to make the notes now, but I'll just start off with the variances. I know I was the only one who brought them up, but is the panel generally in agreement that we can approve the variances?
I can't really hear you very well.
Sorry, these things are, you almost have to lean over the edge. But are we in agreement that the variances that they've asked for are acceptable to the panel? I was the only one who brought it up. So does anybody have a problem with the height, the setbacks, or the parking variance?
I have no issues with the height at all, and I have no issues with the setbacks.
Yep. Okay, I think we should note that.
I just wanted to provide one comment, and that is that they've actually applied for a separate development variance permit. So that
Okay.
will be considered by council as well.
Okay, so that's maybe extraneous to what we're recommending today. Although I always think when they send it to us, they're looking for some comment. The first item that comes to mind is 2 or 3 aspects of the entrance. One would be the materials used that, we would like maybe see that lighter, possibly stronger lighting in the entranceway. And anything that can be done to sort of open that up a little bit and delineate it from the rest of the front of the building. Yeah. The color palette of the building, I think if I could make a suggestion that you should review the colors in the guidelines for that area and look at how you're conforming to them, because I guess specifically there are some colors there that aren't included in the list. I'm not sure that was really meant to inhibit things. It is meant to get some consistency, I imagine, but rather than suggest what you should do, I think we would ask you to review your color palette. It sure isn't a criticism of the overall color palette itself. Would that be okay with the panel that we ask them to review that, or would you like to direct them to specifically use those colors?
I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I'm really gonna have to get into this thing. So would we like them to review the color palette to check its conformance with the guideline, which has been set out specifically as I read it, or do we actually want to direct them to use those colors? Because I guess that's in the guideline.
It does put us in an awkward position, because personally, I feel that the guidelines are a little bit outdated and shouldn't be so prescriptive. But if that's what we have to deal with, then that's what we have to deal with. And it might be a good idea to do this by email, instead of having the applicants come again, because I don't really think that's necessary. If they want to adjust some of the colors, well, fine, I'm happy with that.
So I don't think we do want to give specific direction that way. I just think that, we would ask you to review and see if there are possibilities to conform more closely to that without telling you what to do. That would be my position.
I think your suggestion is the right one. Review it. Maybe the colors are outdated, but that's the colors that we have in the OCP. So maybe the OCP is outdated and it needs to be updated as well. But that's what we're working. That is the measure of what we're doing here is based on the OCP. I like the colors of the building. If it was anywhere else, I think it looks great. But
yeah, and I'd hate to be stuck with brick, wood, and what was the third thing? Was it stone? I mean, the three things that were natural materials. I think that also inhibits any innovation for buildings that are coming to the downtown and to have something exciting and different. So I would hesitate to enforce that one. Accessibility. Could somebody help me out as to what we might want to suggest there?
Just looking over very quickly the site plan, I don't really see any big issues about accessibility. I imagine that there's, I was looking for steps and I didn't see any steps, from the outside to the entryway and the front and back. So I'm presuming that it all works. I think that's a technical thing that they need. If there are problems, then I think that can be caught at building permit stage and so on. So I don't have any objections to what's been presented so far.
Yeah.
Oh,
the last bit.
I said that I think that if there are any adjustments that can be caught, it's mainly a technical issue, accessibility, and that should be dealt with or can be dealt with at building permit stage.
I mean, as far as the handicap issues are concerned?
Well, yeah, we have a very strong code requirement in the building code that deals with just about everything to do with accessibility. The 2018 code outlines everything. So, you know, this is a flat site and we have cars parked at the back and people get into the buildings from the front and the back. And I didn't see anything that raised any flags to me at this stage, design-wise in any way.
Well, I think the fact that a handicapped person can't get to the garbage container is a problem, never mind the parking. So, you know, that's something, the garbage room could be moved. It could be swapped with one of the other parking stalls, maybe, so that it's on this side.
It's about 3 steps down to the parking at the back, which would be quite a long ramp. And it would get right into the parking stalls.
And I think the garbage containers are, they would have to be moved out into the laneway for pickups. There's no garbage trucks gonna come in there and pick it up. So.
Yes, that's correct. So there are specific requirements for the garbage enclosure. The internal space needs to be 3 meters by 4 meters to accommodate the building. So if we were going to reconsider where that space was so that it can engage with the building, there may require an additional parking stall variance because we would be short a stall. Rearranging and arranging this site quite a few times. It's rather complicated. So moving that location could be complex. It may be, we would really need to figure out how that works. Just from a run through of the site design. But you're correct. There could be, we would need to talk to the client about measures for considering how to get down from one space to the other. And it might be a requirement of changing the elevation of the parkade level. Now, that can't just be quickly considered right here. So it would need to be designed and commented through that way.
Maybe we could just, again, make that as an advice for consideration that, you know, accessibility to the garbage would be, you know, an issue that we'd like to see if it could be addressed.
Could I go back to one of the comments I made earlier? I said I didn't see any impediments to the access of the building, but at the rear of the building, there are steps.
Yes.
And I think we have to deal with that. But again, that is a building code requirement and you will be faced with it now or later.
Okay, and there was also mention of shading for the, I'll just let you finish writing there, Claire. Okay, shading for the 3rd floor windows particularly on the south side there, that there was also like a mention of perhaps a louver, you know, a sunshade. I think that'd be a great idea. It would at least acknowledge that, you know, it is facing south and something would be very helpful there. So I think we could make that suggestion.
Or some kind of a mansard roof that came down instead of this shed roof that is actually going the wrong way to try and shade that. One of the suggestions of the OCP is also to have slope roofs that I guess you can say a shed roof is sloped. They don't say how many degrees it's got to slope, but you know, I think the intent is that they're something of a significant angle.
Yeah, I'm not sure a mansard would fit the architecture of this building. It's all slim edge roof lines. But again, how you deal with it is up to you. And I think we're just suggesting that we would recommend shading of some type.
it's not for us to just redesign it. for them,
Exactly,
so.
yeah. Did I forget anything? Did I leave out anybody's comments? All right, well, I think we're good to call an end to the proceedings then. So would somebody move for adjournment, please? Would you want them read back, sort of? Would you mind doing that, sir?
Okay, so I've noted 4 items. Item 1 is consideration of the entrance. So you commented on potentially lighter use of materials, stronger lighting, and delineation at the front of the building. So I've noted for guidelines that could be 3F potentially, which says entrance should offer pedestrian weather protection and should be used to create building identity. And 8A,
Yeah.
which is lighting. So that's the use of lighting in public and private areas. And 9, which is color. So I've
Yeah.
just included that in general. And the other item number 2, I guess, is the color palette. So review of colors in the guidelines and look at how you're conforming to them. So it was 9B guideline. And I also have noted for item number 3, consideration of accessibility for access to the rear entrance, the garbage and parking area. So it'd be guideline 11B. And the 4th one, consideration of shading mechanisms for the 3rd floor, such as a lever, or I don't know if I'm saying that right, to shield the sun.
Louver, yeah.
Louver,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sound
Was
okay?
there another item or?
Are we ever going to do anything about solar powered provisions, something that are real, or is it just going to be sort of fuzzy and say we can put in some sleeves through the roof for future wiring and blah, 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 and nothing is ever going to happen to it? Are we ever going to do something real about that or not?
Well, at the moment, I don't believe our OCP guidelines are that particular. So they're sort of more general in nature at the moment in our current guidelines.
Just out of curiosity, if there were future solar panels on the roof, would they go on the pop-ups at the high level? They seem to be the only kind of flat open areas. So
Yes, I think that's where they'd have to be because they need to be able to maintain or achieve the most solar capacity.
yeah,
The intention, I think, behind the solar design, I would understand from the city is we're vastly moving forward in solar technologies. So if it's solar ready, then when that technology is ready to go, it will make sense to implement it. It's like they did that with conservation of water tanks in Arrington, for example. When it made sense to do it, everybody did it. So if you have the measures ready to go, then you're ready to plug in. But if you don't have the plugins, I mean, that's a very big subject.
I just did a calculation on my house, which has probably got a roof area that's, well, certainly the usable roof area is way bigger than this building. And it would cover half my entire south-facing roof just to meet my energy needs for my house. And I have very low energy needs. So to be realistic, for 8 apartments and 2 commercial units, it's not going to do anything up there. You
There
might get a
isn't enough
bit of
roof,
lighting or
yeah.
something, but not very much.
Tony, can I ask a question?
Please.
I just wanted to know did you say there's EV chargers there?
Yes, there are. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you did. Thank you.
The intention is for them to service each of the 2 stalls, so 1 unit, 2 stalls.
So are we happy with the 4 points that we have? Are we happy with the 4 points that we have?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I rushed that adjournment, but I'll ask again if somebody would move for adjournment. No, I can't hear. Oh, okay. Forgot that too. Yeah, so a mover for the 4 recommendations, please. Don't hesitate to volunteer for these movers and seconders. Yeah, so moved by Ivan and seconded by Ian. I think I saw you move there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And let's do it the other way. Would you move for adjournment?
Sorry, I'm really not hearing.
Okay.
Everything's echoing so much here.
Yeah. Ian, could you move for adjournment, please?
A recommendation to approve the application, is that?
No. We've approved the 4 recommendations. We've had a move and second for that. This is just to adjourn the meeting.
Can I interrupt
Oh,
for a moment?
sure.
Can we just go back to the suggested resolutions here for a minute?
Yes.
What would you like to happen with the file? So would you like it to be accepted as presented, request for additional information and have it go back to staff? Or request for additional information and be reconsidered by the panel? So it's in your blue binder on the first page.
Yes,
There are 3
yeah.
options.
Anybody have a feeling on that, please?
Not at all. It's just to clarify, is the recommendation that any changes be sent to staff? Is that what you said? I think that's fine, so long as we also are able to have a look at it via email.
I'd have to look into that. We don't typically recirculate applications for
Okay.
comments.
Okay,
So I'm not sure logistically whether we can do that.
okay, well then that's fine the way it sits. So any little changes can be dealt with staff.
I would agree.
Sorry to interrupt, Tony.
That's okay. I need guidance. Yeah, so could somebody move to adjourn the meeting, please? Oh, lots of volunteers. Ian moves, Ivan seconds. Thank you for your presentation. Very nice building. I think you probably sensed that through all the comments. So